Hello and welcome to Cooking with Miss Michelle. Last week I showed you how to make sourdough starter, so you hopefully have been feeding your starter all week, and now you probably have a huge bowl of sourdough starter, and you're wondering what you're going to do with all of this starter. So mine has a bunch of bubbles in it. It's nice and happy. So what I can do now is I can make some Amish friendship bread. Friendship bread is really fun because you can share it with friends and neighbors. So what you want to do is you should have about 4 cups of sourdough starter. So you can make 3 jars of your starter. So remember, you don't want to use a jar that has any metal touching the starter. So I have a jar with a plastic lid. So you can split this up into 4 parts, make 3 jars. You can save 1 to use later. So you can keep this jar in your fridge forever. And anytime you want to use it, just take it out the night before and feed it with equal parts of flour and water. Let it sit out overnight, and then the next day it should be all bubbly and ready to go like this is now. When you put it in the fridge, it'll just kind of go dormant, so it'll last. Remember, my other one is from 1962. So if you want to use a lot of it, you can feed it more. I usually just feed mine about a half a cup of flour and water, or 1 cup of each flour and water. If you want to make more later to give to more friends, you can feed it extra and make more jars, but right now I think I'll have enough for 2 friends, 1 jar to keep, and then with the last cup I'll make my Amish friendship bread. So the recipe makes 2 loaves of bread, so you can also share 1. You can keep 1 and share 1. Or if you want to be even more friendly, you can make muffins and share them with lots of different people. So the first step is I'm going to preheat my oven to 325. I just washed my hands, so make sure to wash your hands before you start. So I'm going to turn my oven on to 325. And then I'm going to grease my pan. So you can either use non-stick cooking spray, or you can use butter or shortening and rub it on the sides of the pan. So this is going to help so my bread won't stick to the pan. I'm actually going to want to make 2 of these pans for my 2 loaves of bread. And then a lot of times when you do this, you put flour on the sides to help it from sticking. This recipe uses sugar to give it a little bit of a extra crunch on the outside. So I'm just going to sprinkle some sugar in there. And that's going to give it a nice crust. Okay, so I'll just set that to the side. And then I'm going to need baking powder, baking soda, and salt to begin. So I'm going to do 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder. So what I like to do, so I make sure I get a nice even teaspoon, is fill up my teaspoon and then scrape it on the edge there. So I need 1 1/4. And I make sure I have just the right amount. Next is 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So I'm going to do the same thing and just make sure it's nice and level. Then I need a teaspoon of salt. Oh, sorry, that is a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. You don't want to put too much salt in. gonna do a teaspoon of cinnamon. And 2 cups of flour. And then I want to make sure I have a nice even cup of flour, so I'm just going to level it off with a knife. So I want to make sure I don't get too much. I also want to make sure it is all the way full, so I make sure I do get enough. So there's 1. And 2. Okay, I'm going to mix this together really well. I want to make sure all my spices and my baking soda gets mixed in with the flour. Whoops. And then my recipe tells me in a separate bowl to mix my wet ingredients. Now, I don't want to have to wash another bowl, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little bit of a well in the middle here. I'm going to mix all my wet ingredients in there so I don't have to make an extra dish. Okay, so I need 1 cup of my sourdough starter. Then I need 2/3 cup of oil. So I'm going to switch to my liquid measuring cup here. You always want to use this type of measuring cup for liquids and this type of measuring cup for dry ingredients. Even though they both say they're 1 cup, they're slightly different. So if you absolutely don't have one of these, you can use the dry one, but it's always better to use this for liquid. Alright, so there's my 2/3 cup of oil. Then I need 1 cup of sugar. I'm going to stir that in the middle, keep that in the middle. And then I need a teaspoon of vanilla. And 3 eggs. So I'm actually going to crack my eggs in a separate dish. That way if I get any shell in them, I can easily see it and take it out. And I won't lose a piece of shell in my whole recipe here. So I'm just going to tap the egg on the bottom of the bowl. And then pull the shell apart. Then I can inspect it. It looks like there's no shells in there, so I'll dump that in. And I'll do each egg by itself, so that way there'll be less to look for shells. So that one looks safe. I'll pour that in, and then I have 1 more. Oh. Nope, it's safe. All right, there's my 3 eggs. So I'm just gonna mix those in with the liquid. And then once that's most of the way combined, I can start going around the edges and getting my dry ingredients mixed in. Okay, so that is the whole recipe. Now, if I want to, I can add some chocolate chips or some chopped nuts or raisins. And I think that sounds really good, so I'm gonna actually add all three of those into my recipe. So I want to make sure I mix it so all my flour and dry ingredients get moistened. So it says 1 cup of chocolate chips, nuts, or raisins. So I'm just going to fill part of my cup with chocolate chips, part of it with nuts, and then I'll top it off with some raisins. Hi, Bella. And I'm just going to stir it just enough to mix those in. I don't want to over mix it. Okay, so now it's ready to go into my pans. So I'm going to divide it into 2 pans, or like I said, you could do muffin tins. And I just want to make sure to scrape everything out of the bowl. These loaves look like they might be kind of small. So we'll see how they turn out. If mine are too small, you can just do yours in one pan, but I think this will be more fun because then I can share some with my neighbors. Okay, so now I'm gonna make a little bit of a topping for my bread. I'm just gonna mix 4 teaspoons of sugar. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a teaspoon of cinnamon. I'm just going to mix that together and sprinkle it on top of my bread. So I might just take it in the spoon, then I can sprinkle it evenly over the top. All right, now I'm going to put my loaves in the oven. I'm going to set the timer for 25 minutes. And then I'll come back and check them to see if they're done. Okay. I'm going to check and see if my bread is done. So I'm going to do the toothpick test. I'm going to stick my toothpick in and I'm going to see if it comes out clean. Okay, so it looks clean, so that means they're ready to come out. Okay, so my friendship bread is done. So I'm just gonna wait for this to cool down. Then I can take them out of the pan and I'll wrap one up and I'll leave it on my neighbor's porch with a nice friendly note. And I'm gonna make sure if I give my neighbors the starter, I'm gonna leave them the directions for how to take care of it. And I'm gonna leave them the recipe for the bread so they can make their own friendship bread and hopefully share it with someone else. So you can give this to as many people as you want and give the recipe, and then they can share it and share it and share it and keep it going. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Happy bread making!